Hello, hello. Welcome to the second episode of the Our Voices podcast, where we give our athletes a platform to express their opinions. I am your host, Sly, and I am joined today by midfielder Branden Wilson and Bryce Cheek, goalkeeper of the Utah men's lacrosse team. My guys, how you doing?
Doing well. Appreciate you having us over.
Yes, I'm doing well. Appreciate you for having us. Thank you.
No problem. It's Black History Month, and I want to hear your thoughts and experiences with where you guys grew up and how different it was in playing lacrosse. You know, Branden, I'll start with you. You're from California. Tell me a little bit about where you grew up.
I'm Branden Wilson. My ethnicity is Black and Mexican. I'm 23 years old. And I was born in Los Angeles, California, and moved to Orange County when I was a little bit older, San Clemente to be exact. And that's where I went to high school, and then eventually moved to Laguna Beach after. And growing up, it was a little difficult. I grew up in a nice neighborhood. You know, my parents did well, so I was a minority majority of the time. But I did have a lot of colored friends that, I mixed in well. But as I got older, it was definitely a lot harder. I could, start to see, racism a little bit more. And I definitely experienced it with people, going to a majority Caucasian school, them pointing fingers, saying this and that. And it was difficult, interacting with them, kind of trying to understand why they're coming from that angle. But, as I got older, I realized, it's not them, it was passed down from generations. And I'm definitely on here, and I appreciate you having me, just to bring awareness and try to help them understand, try to have them step in our shoes and see what it's really like.
Yeah, you know what? I talk to a lot of people, and they think like, oh, you're doing well as far as like your parents did well, and, you live in a nice home, a nice area. So they don't think that you go through, racism or things. Like I had a friend who grew up out here, went to a local high school, and of course out here is predominantly a white community. And it was a nicer school, but like they treated him so weird. And like he wasn't invited to like birthday parties. He wasn't invited to other activities, and he just didn't understand. And so like it was, he did a different experience to the racism aspect. And I think a lot of people need to understand it's like, not just because you're in poverty or you grew up in a bad neighborhood can you experience racism, but you can really experience racism no matter where you're at. At the bottom line, racism is, people going against you because of the color of your skin or how you look or how you walk or, perception, right? People's perception of you is just different. And as you said, especially at your guys' age, it's passed down, right? Because it's like, how? In this generation, the last 20, 25, 30 years, how can kids have that racism in them? When we've grown up in such an integrated world, it has to be passed down. And so fighting through that, and we'll get into that a little later about how you experienced that and got through that and how to professionally handle those situations. But that was great. Now, Bryce, I know you're from the southeast part of the United States. Now, a lot of people out here in Utah don't truly understand how different that really is. Tell us about how you grew up.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I'm from North Carolina, like you said. I'm from Summerfield, a small little town in the area. In between Stokesdale is kind of more of a back roads, not too big city. And so being from North Carolina, we're one of the early states that actually had slavery, and that was a big part of that event in American history. And so wherever you go, you're kind of surrounded by those past injustices. And I even have a plantation by my old elementary school. And so being prejudiced, being racist, it was more of like a trend, more of if you weren't racist, you weren't in the it crowd. And I see kids always walk around with, the South would rise again on their shirts, who would have Confederate flags on their trucks.
Oh, wow.
And so if you weren't on that same wavelength, then you were kind of the outcast. And so growing up, like Branden said, I started to see racism as I got older and older. But as a kid, I never really knew who I could trust, because growing up in also in a predominantly white area, I would try to make friends with people as much as possible. But if kids argue, if kids start talking, I would see their true sides, and I'd hear racial slurs being thrown at me, and so it kind of made it hard for me to trust not only my friends, but also just people around me in general, because I didn't know who I was actually talking to if I was talking to an actual genuine person, or that person had, another side to them that I didn't see, that they didn't want me to see. And that was only brought out in conflict.
Yeah, that's so tough. And I feel like more than ever, in 2016, I felt like that became more obvious. In 2016, I felt like there was a lot of people who had those feelings, had those things, but it was made comfortable for them to bring that out and be like that. But you grew up in it. You grew up in the South. And, I've been to Atlanta and I've been to some southern states, and I just understand that it's not like that on the West Coast,
right.
And it's very strong. And as you said, like, that South will rise again. Just imagine the trauma that puts on you,
right.
Because you're like, what does that mean? And then people tell you exactly what that means. And we do Black histories in school, and we understand how the South and the Civil War happened, and how people truly feel. But that was a big statement that I've heard when 2016 and Donald Trump became president, was that mindset was now okay to talk. Right. Publicly.
Right.
And so that was extremely, extremely difficult. Yeah. Now, last week on our episode, we had Clark Phillips and Mekhi Bernard from the football team. And we hit on a big topic within Black history being taken out of schools. And I thought, I should definitely talk with you guys about it, because it's something that hits home. You guys are young. You guys have learned Black history in school, and were taught exactly what slavery was and what all those things are. But I want to talk about, the other aspect of it. I really feel like Black history is just as important as American history. Black is just as important to American history as the Revolutionary War, right? And so I want to hear your guys' thoughts on taking Black history out of schools, and should it stay in schools, but also what needs to be taught in schools, not just the negative parts of, Black people being here in the United States, but what are the positive things that they need to experience? And Bryce, I'll go with you. What are your thoughts on Black history being taken out of schools, and then what should be taught?
Yeah, I think it's very tragic that some states are taking Black history out of schools. Just like you said, Black history is also a part of American history, so why take a piece of American history out of an American history class? But I think it is important that we do relay and go over slavery and Jim Crow and all the racial injustice that's occurred to African Americans over the course of American history. Winston Churchill made a quote saying, "Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it again." So I think that's important that we learn from our past mistakes and go on from there. But along with the bad, I think we should also learn the good. We should also learn of all the accomplishments that African Americans made, such as the Greenwood District in Tulsa, Oklahoma. People call that Black Wall Street. That was built and made for African Americans, and that created a certain Black economic and cultural mecca for us. And certain people such as Neil deGrasse Tyson, an expert leader in astrophysicists, Barack Obama, the first Black president, LeBron James, one of the greatest basketball players to ever walk this earth. These are all examples of Black excellence. And so we should not only learn about the bad, but learn about these great leaders and learn about all these great figures that we look up to, and to show that African Americans aren't just a sob story, but we're a story of triumph, and we're a story of determination, a story of how people can be set and thrown to the lion's den, but make it out the other side.
Man, straight facts. That's gold. I absolutely love that, because, one of the big words you said there was triumph, right? And if anybody wants to understand what it's like being an American, it's victory and triumph, right? It's like us, showing independence against the Brits in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
And so what Black history is a continuous story of triumph, right? We were at war for hundreds of years. And then, when it was ended, we were kind of left to figure it out on our own. So limited resources and getting all that done. But the continuous story of all those people that you said is the story of triumph. And last week we said that, Mekhi and Clark and I, we said that Barack Obama becoming president was an amazing feat,
Exactly.
you know, in Black history. You know, the most powerful position in the world, they say.
Right.
And, you know, somebody that looks like us or comes from our heritage was in that position. So now it's possible for young kids. So I think that showing stories of triumph, you know, illustrating Black excellence, as you said, gives little kids that look like us, you know, the strength, mindset, and possibility that anything is possible.
Exactly.
So I absolutely love that. That is a great depiction on what it is. What about you, Branden?
Going off that, I definitely believe, you know, it's kind of tragic that, you know, they want to take Black history out of, you know, schools because, you know, without learning about something you don't understand and it doesn't bring awareness to people. And, you know, we're not going to grow as a community, as people, because if you don't learn, you don't understand. You still, you know, we still stay in the same place that we are at right now, you know, criticizing, pointing fingers, having opinions. Because when you learn, you know, you grow, you understand, you get another point of view, another perspective. And I just feel like, you know, as we get older, you know, we definitely want to learn more about each other, and definitely, you know, get better where we're at right now, because I just feel like, you know, there's still so much that we could learn and, what's the word?
I mean, I feel like, you know, the story of equality, right?
Yes.
You know, if you want to know what this country is founded on, you want to read the Declaration of Independence, you want to read it, they talk about all men being created equal, right? You know, that's the most powerful word in those documents. And we aren't equal. You know, that part of being equal is very sensitive, you know? And so, like, I think that if we want to get to equality, you know, for all races in the nation of immigrants, right? Even white Americans are immigrants to this country. You know, if we want to get to a sense of equality for all, you know, we have to continue to evolve, as you said. And by evolving, and we're just understanding where other people are just not equal at. And that's extremely difficult. So I love what you hit on.
Yeah, and I also want to add to that. People sometimes think that when people address these issues and address certain topics in America and say that we need to change them and fix them, they think that we're bashing America and that we're complaining about our country. And I remember my father told me that being a patriot doesn't mean blindly following rules that people made 300 years ago for this country. It means finding the best ways to change certain aspects of your country so that at the end of the day, you are the best country in the world.
Continue to evolve.
Continue to evolve. Yeah.
I love that. And defining what being a patriot is, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, what is that to you? Like, if people are out there and they're talking about, I'm a patriot, really understand what you're saying and what it truly means.
Exactly.
Because I think that, you know, there's so many examples of Black people being more of a patriot than others.
Exactly. Right.
You know, through all the struggles that we had. I mean, you look at even in the Revolutionary War, you know, there was Crispus Attucks? Yeah, right? Yeah. He was one of the ones who started it and made sure that, you know, we had pride. He was a Black guy. You know, you think about the World War I, you know, Tuskegee Airmen. Yeah. You know, you had a whole division of Black pilots who literally helped save the war for us.
Exactly.
And then, you know, other stories that go on, Vietnam and all this stuff about you protecting this country and loving it. And, you know, I talk to a lot of people and hear stories all across the board. You know, people from different countries that come here. People love America. Right. You know, but that's the idea of America that people love, right? It's you can be free, you can do what you want, you can really enhance and take advantage of your creative side. You know, we're all individuals in this world, and I think that America is supposed to symbolize that, right? Well, I think the basketball player right now, Enes Kanter, you know, he's from Turkey, and he's like, I'm so proud to be an American. I heard he changed his last name to Freedom. I haven't confirmed that, but like, he loved that so much because that's the idea of America, right? Yeah. Is freedom. And he's like, in my country, it's definitely not like that. So being here in America, that's what it symbolizes. That's what being a patriot means, is being proud of the country that you're a part of. And I think that Black people have shown that, you know, throughout the years, throughout the centuries, more than people understand. And I think that people need to definitely take that into consideration when they have, perception issues, when they're profiling and judging people before they know them, and really understand that, like, look, we're here on this earth together.
Right.
Let's not judge somebody before we know them and take that. But so with that, I want to get your guys' thoughts on some of the racial things that's been happening around the country, such as police brutality, racial profiling, cases like Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Trayvon Martin, and of course the many others. But, Bryce, I'll get started with you. But what are your feelings when you see or hear about the events like these? I definitely want to understand your thoughts on, like, when you initially hear like that went on, what goes through your head?
What goes through my head mainly is I feel like I won't be ever treated as humane as anybody else would. To them, I'm not a human being. To them, I'm a target.
Right.
And given my stature, given my size and what I look like, my mom always taught me that I can't lash out in anger. I can't lash out in any way, shape, or form, because that looks a lot different than someone who's smaller than me doing that. And you never know when that last interaction was with either the police or with someone on the street, like Zimmerman, who wants to take matters to his own hands. You never know when that moment will be your last.
Right.
And so I feel like in this country, given all these issues, throughout my life, I've been playing a game of chess, and I haven't been really living life as freely as I wanted to, because I know I can't live as freely because I can pay the consequence, which is my life.
Yeah, you're always walking.
I'm always walking
on eggshells.
Exactly.
Right? You step into a room, you got to double think, right? And I think there's a lot of people in this country who don't have to feel like that. Right. And I think there's a lot of Black people who are literally taught that. Like, you have to, walk on eggshells everywhere you go, respect authority, a common saying. And, I've heard, some of my coaches in the professional ranks, were just like, don't be the angry Black man.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
And I'm like, what does that mean?
Right.
Right. And again, power of perception.
Power of perception.
A big Black guy, lashing out, speaking angrily, and speaking loudly, is considered a serious threat. Right?
Exactly.
So you see a lot of people act a certain way, and just understand that you can't do that.
Mm-mm.
And so that is so difficult, for you to fathom, as far as what your thought process is on handling situations. You can't do everything that everybody else can. Branden, what about you? What are your feelings towards events like these?
Building off that, with all the past events that have happened, I'm definitely hurt, because I feel like we're not, it's repeating. We're not learning from anything. I hate the perception of, Black men as a threat. Mm-hmm. They're this way. And people always have something to say. So going off what Bryce said, life has always been, walking on eggshells, and just feeling like, today could be your last if you were to lash out and this and that. So just always, having that in the back of your mind is always kind of scary. Mm-hmm. Growing up as a mixed, person like I am, especially in a, white area. So that's always been scary, and definitely want that to change, in the future, if any way possible, because, it's definitely in repeat.
Yeah, and I just want to build on what Branden said with being in a predominantly white area. For all kids who've gone through this, through all Black kids, through all kids of color who've gone through this point in their life where they might be in a predominantly white area, whatever you do, it feels like you're representing that entire community. Every move, every step I take, every move I make, I'm representing the Black community. If I lash out in anger, I'm making them look bad. They're like, oh, well, that's a typical Black person being angry. Oh. I have to always live my life to make sure that I'm making not only my family proud, but also my entire race. And it's a very, I wouldn't say, not a very tiresome job, but it's a lot to put on a kid's shoulders, any kid's shoulders at this point.
But I like that you say that, because I think a lot of people need to hear that, right? Because that's Black history. I of course love history, and so when Black history comes around, I just, I get really emotional and I get really into this. I can count countless stories of me learning Black history in school and just getting so overwhelmed. Right. But like, that fact right there of being a young man having to carry such weight, of your community, of your race, of who you are, right? Because how you act is how that person's going to treat the next Black person that looks like you, right? And so, you got to handle that perception. And there's people who don't want to carry that weight. Right. And so they end up acting out differently than they would just because they don't want to do that. Right. And so like Black history, and why I say that's Black history, because you hear countless stories of how that has happened over the years. Right. I was just listening to a story earlier this week, about the sit-ins, in the 50s and 60s, where they wouldn't let Black people sit in restaurants. Everything was segregated. It was just segregated drinking fountains, but segregated restaurants. Right? And to the point to where like they were taking chairs away, they literally wouldn't serve, but they would sit in there until they got served. Right. And I just think that there was tons of young people, 10 years old to 16 years old, that had to be taught restraint. Right? People spitting on you, people yelling at you, people throwing stuff on you. And you have to stay calm, and you have to stay, your mind has to stay on track to what the mission is. And you can't lash out. And I think that Black history has taught, or Black people in history have taught you, or has taught you patience. Right. And knowing that your first reaction often isn't the best reaction. Mm-mm. So you really have to think about things. And I think that that was one of the things that I really appreciated, when doing research and understanding Black history, is the patience that a lot of young, Black kids had to have back in those days in order to live in this country. Because, you do something bad, you're getting locked up, and then you are not being able to do anything. So you literally couldn't lash out.
Exactly.
But what you're saying of being young and having to carry that burden, it's not in the 60s. It's still today. And I think a lot of people need to understand that. And I'm so glad that you mentioned that. But Branden, I want to come back to you and talk about, lacrosse and how you guys grew up with that. So with lacrosse being a predominantly Caucasian sport, when all these events were going on, what was the vibe between you and your teammates? Why do you feel like why would it be different in your sport? Do everybody on your team or in your community within your sport, did they feel the same way you did when Colin Kaepernick was taking a knee, or BLM rallies were happening, or things of that nature? When these racial conflicts were going on these past few years, how was it for you in your sport?
For me personally, it was definitely a weird time, because I feel like, playing lacrosse in a Caucasian sport, they couldn't relate. I felt like a lot of them, turned their head and shoulders, kind of looked away from what was happening. Where like, what I wanted was for all of us to talk about it, to get an understanding, to see what's going on, to learn from it, to grow, to make us even, better unit, better team. But that didn't happen. There was a few guys that came up to me and asked me what happened. We talked about it. But as far as, the whole vibe, and there was a lot of tension, and people didn't really know what was going on and had one way to think about it. And then, the other group had, another way. So it's definitely a weird tension, during those times.
Man, I love that. And it's because of, with that place, actually, you know what? Let me ask you first. What do you think needs to happen? In that case, what would you have liked? You're a person of color, mm-hmm. in this predominantly white community or white sport, or, just in a different, you do feel like an outcast. You're a minority in that area. What would you like to have seen happen?
For me, I think all my teammates, coming up to me, asking me questions, giving me support, telling me, we're here for you despite what's going out, outside, within our environment. People just trying to learn, because if people don't try to learn, they're still stubborn and still believe, the beliefs that they were taught or seen around them. So definitely support and just trying to have an understanding, I'd say.
I love that, because every successful, person, individual that I've heard or listened to, I'm in entrepreneurship now. So I listen to, Elon Musk, to Jeff Bezos, to all these guys who, they're multi-billionaires. But, they are guys who came from nothing, but they started about it. But, I like to listen to successful people because that's where I see myself, right? And one thing that I hear them constantly say is, you're forever learning, right? And that's what you're just saying right there, is that like they turned it off as far as not trying to learn about it. And it's kind of like, why? Like this doesn't, it's not just me here that's affected. You're affected too.
Yes.
And so for you to turn the cheek because you feel like you're not, this doesn't involve you, is doing a disservice to all the people who's went through things throughout the years. And so I love the fact that it's something that I think everybody needs to understand, that we are continually learning and continually having to understand that it's not the same for everybody. So be a supporting person so you're never the problem. Your teammates are never going to be the problem because they're now educated on that fact. They're educated on how it makes you feel. They're educated on what it does to people, so don't be that person, so I love that. Bryce, what about you? Being in lacrosse, what was your experience during all these times?
Yeah, my experience overall was more like what Branden said. My teammates, they felt like it had nothing to do with lacrosse and nothing to do with really anything to do in our sport or in our school per se. So they wanted me to just deal with it. And they said, well, I'm white, so it doesn't really have anything to do with me. And I feel like I can't be a part of it. And I'm like, you have no idea how important it is for you to be a part of it. Right. Because it takes a village to make a change. It takes more than just African Americans to make this country a better place. It takes the entire country to make a change. And I'm the quote unquote minority. Imagine if the majority gets involved. Not everyone's involved in this fight for civil rights and fight for justice. And at that point, we're all fighting for a calmer, greater good. And I feel like the lacrosse community just needs to, I guess, just kind of be more aware and be more inclusive in the fact that if it's just an African American issue, they don't have to make it just an African American issue. They can make it an American issue. Yeah,
I love that. And again, this is the Our Voices podcast with Branden Wilson and Bryce Cheeks of the Utah University men's lacrosse team. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. These conversations are so impactful. And, I think education is the biggest part of that. I think the community needs to understand that it takes a village, right? It's not just Black people's problem. It's everybody's problem. And if we all do this together, the faster we can get to equality.
Right.
And so I love that fact. And so I want to go into what was your guys' favorite moment? Let's we're winding down, man. This time has gone by so fast. But I want to know what your guys' favorite moment from Black history is. What was an amazing triumph or failure, because we do learn from our failures. So what was an amazing triumph or failure within Black history that you just can't get out of your head? Bryce, I'll start with you.
I'll put it into two. I say the first one, which is, a highlight of African American history. I don't know if you've seen Hidden Figures, but it involves these three females, Katherine Johnson, Mary Jackson, and Dorothy Vaughan, who are all African American, and they all work for NASA. And due to the color of their skin, they weren't really given a chance to contribute much towards space launchings and landings. But when things went down to the wire, they had issues with landing one of their astronauts, John Glenn, into orbit. And so basically they stepped in and were the brains behind the whole operation of landing John Glenn into orbit. And I feel like that was a stepping stone for the African American community to show that we are just as intellectual, if anything, more or as equal as anybody else. And then also a low point for me in African American history, I'll never forget it, because we have African American museums where I'm at in the South, because African American history runs deep in the South. There's a little boy in Alabama named Emmett Hill, and he was in, I think, a gas station and a white woman walked by him, and people say that he whistled at her and catcalled her. And these two white men who saw him, they took matters in their own hands and kidnapped him. They beat him. They threw him in the river near his house and tied a fan to his feet so he would sink. And they showed his body on TV. They showed his body in the newspapers, and it was horrific. He didn't even look the same as he was when he was alive. And that kind of showed the ugly side of America. And I felt like that showed what needed to be changed and finally gave everybody, not just Black people, the truth of what is really going on. And later on, that same woman on her deathbed, I think about 3 or 4 years ago, she actually confessed that he didn't whistle to her. She didn't hear anything, and she only complied in court saying that they did whistle to her because she didn't want to, again, be the outcast. She wanted to follow the trends. She wanted to follow the it crowd, and that it crowd was prejudice. And so that just shows that when you are in the minority, the majority can be the ones who are in the wrong, but they can make you feel wrong because they're all agreeing with each other. And so that was also a low point for me in African American history. But I felt it was a powerful change.
I love it. The Emmett Hill story is he was only 14. Mm-hmm. Just had his 14th birthday. Hasn't lived at all. Mm-mm. And they treated him like that. And that was in the 1950s. So if a lot of people want to understand, that was just 60 years ago, 60, 70 years ago. That wasn't that long ago. Mm-mm. That was the ugly side of America that wasn't that long ago. So when a lot of people are like, give it up, and slavery's over, this and that, segregation and a lot of these ugly things, the ugly parts of America were still going on not that long ago. Mm-hmm. So we're still fighting every single day. And then to the Hidden Figures, I love that it was a true story. A lot of people, that's good fictional story, yada, yada. No, that was true. And watching the movie, because, movies, I said this last week, movies don't really do everything as far as, being able to show the entire story because there's so much that goes on. Right. But, reading more into that story, that was just an incredible, incredible moment. Mm. And not only Black history, but American history, because those were 3 Black women. Exactly. So women weren't treated great, and they were Black. Mm-hmm. So they had to fight through so much. Exactly. And they were very intellectual, very smart. And to come in and bring that to, NASA and American history was just an amazing moment. So if people haven't seen Hidden Figures, please go see that. Great movie, not just Black movie, but just an amazing movie for, furtherment, if that's even the word, just to further the equality in this world, both women and in minority. Right. What about you, Branden? What was your favorite moment in Black history?
I think my favorite moment of Black history is definitely Barack Obama becoming, the first African-American president. It just showed us kids of color that despite all the limitations, obstacles, that you can prevail and become anything you truly want to be, despite your background, color, anything such. So definitely that was definitely a high moment because that showed me, me being of color and, in a white world, there's so much, going on. But if you really, truly, truly believe in yourself and prevail and have determination, that you can become anything you truly want to be.
Man, it's great. Of course, like I said last week, that was a big thing with Mackay and Clark and I. And I think people really need to understand is like they think about like, oh, I didn't like his policies. I didn't like this and that. It's beyond that. It's the show that, the resilience that he faced, all these years leading up to be one of the youngest presidents as well. Not just Black. He was one of the youngest presidents and be successful, have 2 terms and show that possibility that literally like, okay, the presidency is not out of reach. It's something that's possible. I absolutely love that. And I think people need to learn or lean more into why that's so important in Black history. But, I also, to end this, my last question with you guys is I want to talk about how do we improve as a society, as a people. What needs to be done within schools and society right now, today, to be better, to essentially be better as people, be better as a society, treat each other better? What can people actively do to strive for equality? Bryce, I'll start with you.
Yeah, as we talked about Black history being taken away from schools, I think that's the first step into us growing further socially and politically. I think that people should know American history as a whole, its ups and downs, and so that case, and in that way, we all know the context and the meaning behind the hurtful words and microaggressions that we convey on a daily basis in this country. And I think once we do that, we can finally start to realize, understand the weight that it carries and the history behind it. And so I think that will help us better understand where we're coming from. And then also, it's a very elementary phrase, but treat people the way you want to be treated, honestly.
Hey, the simplest phrases have the biggest meaning.
The biggest meaning, exactly.
Yes, no question.
And so, like, I feel that, like, if we learn to put aside our prejudice ideas and learnings that not we all, but people in America have grown up learning, because, it might be a trend to be this way, it might be a trend to be that way, to have these sort of ideas. I think if we put all that aside and truly interact with people in a way that we would feel comfortable interacting with to ourselves, I think in that case we would strive better as a country also in that factor.
Branden, what about you? What do we need to do?
Like Bryce said, definitely incorporating, Black history back into schools, because that's the number one step. Understanding, learning can, definitely broaden your horizon of just what's going on with everything. And then I think, kind of going off what Bryce said again, try to step in, somebody else's shoes and see, try to understand and see where they came from, their background. Because I think, that's the number one step, is just understanding and, bringing awareness to, become a better community, become better people, instead of judging and pointing fingers.
Man, you guys are so, I feel like you guys are beyond your years, and I think it's because it's so important to you guys. You guys have experienced a lot. And you guys have definitely have general feelings. So it's not like you're too young. You're just as involved in this as anybody else in this country. As the 60-year-old that's a politician, as the 10-year-old that's going into middle school, you guys are just as important as everybody else. So I really appreciate you guys, saying your voices here, because I agree with both of you. I say listen to other perspectives. Just because you grew up a certain way doesn't mean the next man did. There are different things systematically that happen to people of color that was severely detrimental to their current status, right? I believe people of color are turning the corner and gaining ground on being equal in the game of life right now. I definitely think we have improved over the last 50 years, but we're still not where we need to be. So if people can truly understand that, but, we can't forget that segregation and civil rights were just 50, 60 years ago. That was not that long ago. And, once that happened, once, segregation stopped and the civil rights and movement was ended, people of color were still not given much resources to get started, right? And so you got to understand that in this country, we're literally starting from zero. And, you have situations like Greenwood, like Black Wall Street, and still to this day was the only airstrike on national soil.
Exactly.
Right? And was it 1918?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's around that time.
So, those stories are just impactful, and just know that people of color didn't start the way, and people talk about generational wealth and things passed down. Right. People of color are starting, like me and my wife, we're talking about, owning properties. And I talk with her about it because, in her family, she's half Black, half white. And in her family, ownership and buying houses, that was a big thing, right? Mm-hmm. And, when I grew up, no, it's just survival. We're paying rent. That was the norm, right? And so now we're trying to get that mindset of what it truly means to be successful in America is ownership and being proud and those things. So I do think that we're moving in the right direction, but it's just starting. And as I said, I truly appreciate you guys coming down. That'll do it for us today on the Our Voices podcast. Bryce, Branden, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your incredible stories of resilience and mental strength. I appreciate you and wish you nothing but the best in everything you guys do.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
And for all the Ute fans and listeners, please do what you can to support these young men and never stop striving for equality. Please like, share, subscribe, and tune in to next week for another episode of the Our Voices podcast.